So thank you, Janet. I've delivered a webinar on job development several months ago, and so if you've participated in that, you probably know a little bit of my background, but I'll update you on it. I have my educational background is I have a 3-year diploma from Fleming College in employment counseling, as well as a social service worker diploma and a couple of other diplomas and certificates. I've been in this field for pretty close to 25 years in one capacity or another. I started as an employment coordinator, and I've done job development, employment counseling. I've been a trainer, an instructor as well. And so I've had quite a variety of jobs over the last 25 years. I left this field for a few years and was self-employed and did some training and a few other things like auctioneering, as an example. Just wanted to try a number of things. And I'm a great believer in people doing what they want to try as far as an occupation and giving it a shot and see if it is of interest. It kind of spices up life. So this webinar is called How to Motivate Different Generations. And how this came about is that I had a situation where I was consulting with an employer in Waterloo. It was a father-son situation. And so based on that, and I'm going to tell you the story a little bit later, but based on that, I started doing a lot more research on the differences between the generations. So I'm going to start that. As Janet indicated, I do have a lot of slides, and I'm going to at times probably whip through those slides very, very quickly, but I know that you can access this presentation online after the fact. If you'd like a copy of it, I can also send it to you. Another thing, I drew from an online bit of information. It's called the Generational Differences Chart. And so I drew a lot of my material from that, not totally 100% from that, but some of it. And I do have a copy that I can send you in an email if you request it. It's an 11-page document, and it goes into a lot more detail than I'm going to provide today. So that information is available. So motivating the 4 generations, why would you do that? Well, you want to learn how to motivate your client while understanding the philosophies of each generation. You learn how the baby boomers, Gen X's, Millennials, or the Gen Ys, and iGens, Gen Zs, have different needs, and by understanding how they tick will help you work with them, place them into employment, and then support the employer with your knowledge. So I think it's key to understanding the 4 different ones, and there is a 5th one, but for the most part, that generation is out of the workforce. The youngest of those folks, and they're called traditionalists. The youngest would be 72 at this particular point. So there are some obviously still in the workforce, but not a lot. So what are the generations that are still in the workforce? Baby boomers. I happen to be a baby boomer. That's pretty obvious by the gray hair, I think. So they were born between 1946 and 1964. Generation X was the next generation to come along. They were a smaller group, a smaller demographic. They were born between 1965 and 1980. Generation Y, or the Millennials, which we have heard a lot about, they were born between 1981 and 1994. And Generation Z, which is the most recent, or iGens, because of their interest or their connection to technology, they were born between 1995 and 2014. So one point to make is, depending on the demographer you're talking about or reading about, there are different dates within a few years of each other. Some would say baby boomers go up to 1965 and Gen X's don't start until 66, whatever. I just took what I thought was the most reasonable. The second point I'd like to make is I have children from every one of the last 3 generations. So I can relate to people who have understanding or have some knowledge of the characteristics of a particular generation, because I've dealt with all 3 of them. And my youngest, the Gen Zs, are heading off to, one's in university and one's in college, or will be in college, and they're going to be in the workforce in a couple of years. Why do we need to know the differences in the generations? Well, I think we need to understand the values of each generation holds. We need to have an understanding of counseling or the marketing approach that we should be taking with each generation. Providing information to employers on how to work with each generation in a positive and successful manner. And there is a bit of friction today with a lot of baby boomers, particularly with the Gen Zs, the iGens, being able to understand the generational differences in employers we work with. And that can be a factor as well, because the philosophies are different, very, very different in some cases, if you're looking at a baby boomer versus a millennial. Recognizing behaviors, motivating factors, and challenges in working with all generations. And as counselors or job developers or whatever capacity we're in within an employment organization or otherwise, we need to be able to understand people better so that we can work with them and motivate them potentially. So we've had the millennials. They're a big demographic called Generation Y. We have Generation X. They're the post-boomers. They're called the in-between because they're stuck in between two large demographics. They're definitely a smaller demographic. And the baby boomers, of course, they were the main generation. They were considered that, and we'll talk a little bit more about that later. And then the Generation Z, the iGens, who they're called iGens principally because of the technology they're so attached to. It's an habitual thing. I can relate to that because, again, my two daughters are one's 17 and one's 18 at this particular point, and they are definitely attached to technology. So baby boomers, what about them? Staying longer in the workforce, 20 to 25% continue working after 65. So you potentially will be dealing with them. We deal with them here in that they come into our office looking for work specific. They have specific ideas around that. Post-war generation, and they're seen they've seen many changes in the workplace. So I wouldn't say they're cynical, but they've seen a progression in the workplace, and particularly with the different generations. Sometimes seen as radicals, greedy, materialistic, or ambitious. They pursued the American dream or the Canadian dream. They've had it all. They really have. They're the generation that were post-war. They're affluent generation. The folks that are their children, grandchildren, are going to be the beneficiaries of a lot of money in the next few years. So baby boomer work ethics and values. As I said, I'm going to go through this very quickly, and I apologize if it's for some of us too quickly. I just want to cover the 57 slides that I have. They just like conformity and rules. They're not very high on rules at all. Work is an anchor, and work is what makes them what they are in a lot of cases. They look to it as something solid, as something structured for them. They have a loyalty to the team as well. Collaborative, they take a collaborative approach in the workplace, and they work efficiently. They don't like to see mess or fuss or whatever, or wasted time. They're very ambitious. They want to progress, climb up the ladder, or move into different positions as well. They strive to do their best. They want to do their best for an organization. And I see that with people. I see that in myself as well. And the flexible route into retirement. So some of them, as I said, 20 to 25% do not leave the workforce immediately. There's a gradual entrance into retirement as such. Baby boomer workplace view of authority. They are typically skeptical of authority, and they're willing to accept supervision with individuals who have proved themselves. And this goes to, it's pretty key when they're working with the individuals who are millennials or X's. You better know your stuff with these guys and ladies, because they'll push it with you. They want to have respect for anybody that's leading them. They're workaholics, and again, they place a lot of importance, a lot of their value in themselves, a lot of their feelings of self-worth go along with work. They're the folks that invented the 50-hour work week. And visibility, by that, visibility simply means that the more they're seen and heard, the more opportunities they have. And a little bit of a blurb down below there. You can barely see it, but it simply says 4 out of 10 baby boomers would work till they drop if they had the choice. Interesting. Baby boomer workplace views on skill building. Skills are an ingredient to success, but they're not the primary important thing. Work ethic and face time. And again, it gets back to that visibility. So the work ethic is very, very important ahead of skill building. If you can work yourself, 50 hours a week, then that's very important to them. Work assets. These are the good things about them, the things that would make them attractive to an employer. Service-oriented, good at seeing the big picture, willing to go the extra mile for an employer. Employers always like to see that. Pardon me, I just have to take a drink. They work very hard while they're on the job. They're anxious to please. I mentioned that a little bit earlier. Work liabilities. These are the things, obviously, that distract from some of the positives that they are. They are very judgmental in some respects. They expect everybody to be a workaholic. Now, when I say all these things about each generation, I'm generalizing because there are obviously exceptions. And if you're a millennial, you may say that this doesn't apply to me, and it probably doesn't. Or a baby boomer. If you're a baby boomer, some of these things don't apply to you. Dislike conflict. Don't like change in the workforce. Judgmental if you disagree with them, and that comes back to, I'm looking for a reason, particularly sometimes to, if you're a younger generation, to judge you. Peer loyalty, they have loyalty to the folks they work with. Process before results, and this kind of surprised me because I'm not so much task driven, but apparently in general this generation is. So the process comes before the results. Preferred work environment, they want a flat organizational hierarchy. Something where there is opportunities for movement within their democratic work environment, where they have input into decisions. Humane, equal opportunity. They want to be able to have the chance to apply for positions no matter what the situation is. Warm, friendly environment. They love the warm fuzzies. That's what they're about in this generation. What boomers are looking for in a job. They like to achieve work through teams. They want to make a contribution. They need clear and concise job expectations. So you be pretty clear in how you explain what's required within the job. They want to shine and be a star. They want to be noted for what they do, and they want their achievements highlighted. And they want to know that a company represents a good cause. They're a good company to work for. And I've heard this. I started in the workforce perhaps 40 years ago, and I can remember that people were looking for good companies to work for at that time. Communication. They prefer in-person, or keep in mind that they're before the cell phone in most cases. Speak open and direct style. Use body language to communicate. Present options. Be flexible in how you're communicating with them. Answer questions thoroughly and expect to be pressed for details. They want all the information they can get in order to make a decision. They like personal touch with managers. So they like to get to know their managers, probably more so than some of the other generations, except maybe Gen Y or Gen Zs. Get consensus, include them, or they may get offended. So don't come to them after the fact with a decision you made. Let them know what's going on. Let them provide input, and learn what's important to them. They really prefer that you have an understanding of where they're coming from and what motivates them in the workplace. Keys to working with baby boomers. They want to hear that their ideas matter. Those things are important to them. That they present an idea, they want some corresponding feedback regarding that. Silly routines are frustrating. If it doesn't make sense, they don't want to do it. Do well in teams. They do work well in teams because a lot of their work has been in teams for 30 or 40 years. Are motivated by the responsibilities to others. So they feel I could call within the workplace probably a sense of community, and they really work toward, again, it gets back to want to please others. They really feel that they are responsible for others in the workplace. They don't take criticism well. So that's one of the things that if you're meeting with a baby boomer, for instance, or an employer, is probably stay away from the criticism, or at least provide some way around it where you can candy code it, but not still get your point across. Bear with me for a second here. Need flexibility, attention, and freedom. Before they do anything, they need to know why it matters, how it fits into the big picture. I think I said that a little bit earlier in regard to that. Boomer feedback and reward. They like praise. They like a title. If you're gonna hire a baby boomer, give them a title that stands out. Don't call them a production worker, call them something else if that's the situation. Give them something to put on a wall, certificates, awards, things like that. They enjoy public recognition. They definitely feel rewarded by money, and so somewhat more interested in soft benefits than the younger generation. So they like the perks that come with that, rental car, additional days off, flex time, and things like that. Appreciate rewards for their hard work and long hours. Messages that motivate a baby boomer are: you are valued. They definitely want to hear that. You are needed. They definitely want to hear that as well. Those things are very, very important to them and are appreciated within the workplace. And again, it gets back to that reward, a plaque, an honor, public recognition. Now we're moving on to the Gen Xers. This is a generation that's sandwiched between the millennials and the baby boomers. They're almost a forgotten generation in a lot of respects. They're a smaller demographic, as I said earlier. They're considered the in-between generation. They think they will have to work longer than their parents because they're not necessarily the beneficiaries of a lot of inheritance money early on in their work career. Typically, their parents are going to live to quite an age, and so they're indicating they're going to have to work longer in order to survive. 75% indicate they were negatively affected by the Great Recession. So there's some impact there on those folks by the Great Recession. I mean the recession of 2008. In that some of them lost a lot of money and have to work longer. 25% have been with the same employer 15 years or longer, which it goes against the other generations because some of the other generations have moved quite a bit. Generation X, work ethic and values, work-life balance. One of the first generations that wanted a work-life balance. The traditionalists, not so much, and the baby boomers, again, even more so than the traditionalists. Gen X wants to influence terms and conditions of the job. They want to have more say in how things roll out within the workplace. They're outcome oriented. They're output focused. So what is it going to come out of this when we're done the job? That's very important to them. They like casual work environment, and that's the Blue Jean Friday thing, and just very, very casual and not so much formal as the baby boomers in some cases would have had. Appear to have no attachment to a particular job or employer. So that goes to the heart of loyalty, although I did say that the average time is 15 years with an employer. They want meaningful work and innovation, and they're project oriented. So they can more likely project oriented than the baby boomers. Generation X, workplace view on authority. They're skeptical of authority figures, and they'll test authority figures repeatedly just to see maybe how much they know, whether they're able to provide respect for those particular individuals. Gen X view on time at work, again, project oriented. They get right down to the job, get paid to get the job done, so they have an understanding why they're there from a work standpoint. Some of these I'm not going into a great deal of detail because it's pretty self-explanatory, I think. Gen X's workplace view on skill building. Greater skill development will lead to the next job. The more they know, the better. The work ethic is important, but not as much as skills. And again, it's kind of the reverse of what the baby boomers are, in the sense that they value the skills. And I think from the Gen X perspective is they see the advantage in developing more skills, and more skill the better for opportunities, additional career development opportunities. Keep in mind that the baby boomers went into the workforce, there were all kinds of jobs around. There was, I can remember leaving one job one day and going to another job the next day. It's not typical of that today, or perhaps in the 90s wasn't as typical. Working assets, they adapt well to change. They're direct communicators. They don't mind direction but resent intrusive supervision. So give them the job, tell them what it is, and then back away from supervising at that point. They're eager to learn. Again, this gets back to skill development, very determined. They're good task managers, so they stay on task. They're able to get the job done. And good short-term problem-solving skills. They're multitaskers. They thrive on flexibility, and they value information. The more information for these folks, the better. Again, it gets back to that skill development thing that they have an interest in. Work liabilities. These are the things that I spoke of earlier that not so much positive in the workplace. Again, cynical, skeptical. I mentioned a minute or so ago about they challenge authority. They just dislike authority, dislike rigid work requirements. They want flexibility in the workplace. They lack people skills, which is very, very interesting that they do lack people skills. They're impatient. They respect competence. Again, you've got to prove yourself that you're competent and deserve the respect. They reject rules. No long-term outlook. It's interesting that this group, based on their work liabilities, would seem to be somewhat of rebels in the workplace. And they don't understand the optimism of baby boomers and Gen Ys, or the millennials. Preferred work environment for Gen X's? Well, they want a fast-paced and flexible work environment. If you're marketing them to an employer, look for something that's not going to be boring. They want an efficient work environment where the employer recognizes that, an informal place to work. Functional and positive, access to leadership. They want to be able to talk to the managers that they deal with, the supervisors they deal with on a peer-to-peer, I think would be one way to put it. Access to information, again, we talked about that ability to get information whenever they want it and how much they want. What they're looking for in a job. They want their input valued on merit, not age or seniority, which would be pretty typical of baby boomers because longevity in the workplace for them, they build a lot of seniority in a lot of cases. They were with companies 30, 25 years, 30 years, 35 years. They want to work for a forward-thinking company, work with dynamic young leaders, cutting-edge systems technology in place. And this is interesting from them because they would have arrived in the workplace basically in the 80s to 90s, and they would have been at the cutting edge of what I would call the real technology that's come about over the last few years. And they want to be engaged. They want the employer to engage them in the workplace so they feel part of the workplace. Communication, blunt and direct, very similar to baby boomers. They want immediate communication. In other words, don't wait, don't delay in giving us information about the things we need to know within the workplace. Use straight talk, present the facts. Use email as the #1 tool. So they're using email still. Learn the language and speak it. Don't micromanage them. This gets back to supervision. Tell them what needs to be done and let them go and do it. Our manager is very much like that. This is what we have to do. Now you manage within the scope of your responsibilities. This is what you need to do. Tie your message to results. Share info immediately and often. Avoid buzzwords and company jargon. Keys to working with. Well, they want independence and informality in the workplace. Give them time to pursue other interests. There may be some other projects they can be involved in that are part and parcel of your work. It may be a team, it may be a committee or whatever. Allow them to have fun at work. Everybody wants to have fun at work. Maybe these folks, maybe more so, because of the fact that they're not getting their inheritance immediately. That might be a little bit disappointing to them. So allow them to have fun at work. Give them the latest technology. So they're willing to accept the latest technology, more so than the baby boomers are. They're not enamored by public reward. Baby boomers were, remember. They want to be rewarded with time off. Freedom is the best reward. Give them flexibility in the workplace to come and go, potentially, as long as they get their work done. Prefer regular feedback on their work, less dependent on being told that they are good people. So the pat on the back doesn't do it for them. You've got to provide constructive feedback. That's more effective to the Gen X's. Somewhat more interested in benefits than the younger generation. obviously from a security standpoint, and that goes back again to maybe that the understanding is going to be in the workforce a little bit longer or have to work harder. Provide structure, but take a hands-off approach with them. These are all things you can use when you're working with these folks and when you're working with employers as well. If you're identifying the needs of a particular employer and you're dealing with a Gen X, if you know how in general that particular demographic works, so you can present that information to an employer. Message that motivates, do it your way. Again, they want the freedom to be able to do that. Forget the rules. You can't, the little thing up the side there is you can't do a good job if your job is all you do. So sometimes these folks will go over and above what they do as well in order to get the job done. Millennials, this is a group that typically has been the most picked on. I don't want to say the most picked on in history, but I would say in the last 50 years, probably the most picked on. I'm not sure it's justifiable. The things I here in the workplace from employers are, the big one is a sense of entitlement. And, I think we generalize sometimes. There may be that aspect in some cases, but not always. Millennials shift. What about them? Millennials shift in attitudes have led to data depicting 64% of millennials would take a 60% pay cut to pursue a career path aligned with their passions. That's very interesting. Like 60% is a lot of money to reduce your paycheck, but more interested in a job that has to do with a passion or a direction they want to go. Could be a career path, in fact, that they'll work for less because it's leading somewhere that is a step up or a greater opportunity. By 2025, millennials will account for 75% of the global workforce. Now, we have baby boomers that are in the workforce now. Generation X's are in the workforce. But the baby boomer, again, is the largest demographic next to the baby boomer, and they are perhaps the largest demographic in the workforce right now. 69% believe that office attendance is unnecessary on a regular basis. One of the first groups to believe that you can do your work and get out of the office to do it, or you can do it pretty much anywhere. Average length of time in a job is 2 years. They move around quite a bit. That's something to be cautious about as an employer. Boomers is 7 years. Gen X is 5 years, in fact. 92% believe that success should be measured by more than profit. So they're looking at companies who maybe have a commitment to the community or to the world as a whole. Millennials' ethics and core values, they value achievement. They want to accomplish things. They want to move up within a company. Confidence. Extremely techno-savvy. Not as savvy, I would say, as the Gen Zs, but they are definitely techno-savvy because they're moving into the area or the era where a lot of technology was coming about, and they make use of that technology. They like personal attention, more apt to feel that if you leave them alone for too long, they're more apt to feel left out of the situation. So involve them. Make sure you have contact with them as an employer or even as an employment consultant. So they're street smart. Maybe more so than I would say the baby boomers. The most educated group, most educated demographic. They're very highly competitive and they want things now. And I don't know whether that goes to impatience or a sense of entitlement, but they don't like waiting for things. If you're a millennial and if you have parents that are baby boomers, this is a story that's always related. The situation is that parents from our baby boomers will they'll buy a house and they'll fix it up and they'll look at having a nice house about the time they're 40, whereas millennials will look at purchasing a brand new home, typically, and again, I generalize. So the story about why I started doing research was based on a company I did some consulting for in Waterloo, and it dealt with a millennial. A young man at the time about 28 to 30, and his father, who was a baby boomer. And there was some conflict in regard to I was called in to basically determine what the issues were in their relationship, I could put it that way, but also from an organizational standpoint, how to make things work. The father, on one hand, had been a businessman. He'd been self-employed, been very successful. He sold a plant, a company at the time for, I don't know, $6 to $8 million, and the son who he'd been estranged from came back into his life, and he wanted to help the son out. So they decided that, I think he decided that the best thing he could do would be to go in business with his son. But they were from opposite ends of the spectrum. The father was a workaholic, as I said, that 50 plus hours. He placed a lot of value on individuals who were like him, who wanted to be like him and to emulate. So he had problems understanding why his son, who was a millennial, would want to go to, I think it was South America, I think it was Ecuador, for the winter. He had a problem when his son left at 5 o'clock in the afternoon rather than work till 7 or 8. He had a problem if his son didn't work on the weekends. And the son's philosophy was, I want a work-life balance. I don't want to have work as the thing that stands out about me. I want to be able to do things with my life, and I don't want to wait till I'm 65. Whereas the father, I think, had delayed a lot of things in his life. So that caused a problem. I was there for 2 weeks, and honestly, as much as I tried, we had some discussions at the end. It did boil down to philosophies, and they did agree to disagree, but with a better understanding of where each were coming from. So they will test authority. Millennials, get back to the topic at hand. They will test authority. They often seek out authorities for guidance. They're more likely to look for coaches within the workplace. And in that sense, they do respect those folks that will help them out, help their careers, obviously. Their view on time at work, they're effective workers, but as I mentioned about this young fellow that was a millennial, they're gone at 5 o'clock. Their day's done. They've done their work and what they're feeling. You work as a gig or something that fills the time between weekends. Isn't that interesting? View something as a gig or if you work as a gig or something that fills time between weekends. They're motivated by learning, that's from a skill building standpoint, but want to see immediate results. Again, that immediacy, that impatience. Training is important and new skills will ease stressful situations. Work assets. They have a consumer mentality. They understand the consumer. They, in fact, are big consumers comparatively speaking to the earlier generations. They like working in a collaborative environment. That was baby boomers as well. They're goal-oriented, highly educated. They multitask fast. They're optimistic as well, and they have a positive attitude. Very, very technical savvy about them, and very tenacious as well. So I have another little story, and I'm putting these all together, these little stories. But I work with an employer who is located in the rural area, but has a good business, a good graphics business, and great guy. He's about 35 years old, and nothing mean or nasty about him, but his preference is to hire only those that are 35 or under. And this is somewhat based on his experience and based on what he wants as far as a dynamic in the workplace. So it's conditional on us to be aware of those factors, that there are some employers that are looking for specific types of people. And as much as we try to say, well, this person is a fit, and they may, in fact, from a skill standpoint, be a fit, but from a dynamic, from potentially age or experiences, they may not be a fit in that regard. So that's one of the cautions I make. And working with this individual early on, I tried to place someone that was, I think they were about 48, great person. I thought they would have been a fit, but the skills and the age were not in the area where he wanted. And he wanted his team to be a younger team, a team that worked together, that were cohesive, and there was some feeling that by separating it out, that 15-year age difference might have caused a problem. Smaller work environment, obviously, maybe 6 to 8 employees, so that probably made a difference for him. Work liabilities. They have a distaste for menial work. They're brain smart, but they don't like the physical aspects of some jobs. Inexperienced, they need supervision in the workplace. They lack discipline in the workplace. Have high expectations. Again, this goes to maybe a sense of entitlement. I don't want to say that necessarily. Lack the skills to deal with difficult people. So they respond poorly to those who act in an authoritarian manner. And they're, again, very impatient, sorry. Generation Y, the preferred work environment is collaborative, achievement-oriented, highly creative. They're probably the ones that want the most creative work environment. They want a positive, diverse work environment. Again, more than likely, not as much as the Generation Zs look at a diverse workforce, and that can mean, in some respects, a workforce that has acceptance of all backgrounds, fun and flexible, and they want continuous feedback. Not as much as the Gen Zs, but they do want continuous feedback and support that way. What they look for in a job, they want to be challenged, don't want a boring job. And I've seen this many, many times that people have left jobs, and millennials have left jobs that we've placed them with. And when they come back and I have a discussion with them about it, it was a really boring job. Okay, but it was a job. But they have come back and said that they're looking for something that's a little bit more exciting, a little bit more challenging to them. They expect to work with positive people. They want strong, ethical leaders and mentors, want to be treated with respect despite their age. And this is a little bit of a challenge when you're working with baby boomers. And again, I mentioned about baby boomers. They want to. It isn't. Tell me that you're good at what you do. It's show me how good you are at what you do. They want a social network within the workplace. That's friends to work with. They expect to learn new skills and knowledge on an ongoing basis, and they want friendly work environment. Don't like hierarchical organizations, and expect to be paid well. More so than maybe the baby boomers and Gen X's. They want to be, and they expect it very early on. This is what I found as well. The comment I get when I present a particular job, it might be $18 an hour, but I don't want to make $18 an hour. I want to make $22 or $23 an hour. And I generalize again. Want to make a difference within the workplace. Communication. Use positive, respectful, motivational, electronic communication style. Communicate in person if the message is important. Otherwise, use email or voicemail. They're happy with that, unless it's really something that is major. Don't talk down to them. It's presented. Use action verbs when you're talking with them. Prefer to learn in networks and teams using multimedia. So that, again, goes back to the technology that they're looking for. Keys to working with, they like a team-oriented workplace, want to work with bright, creative people. I've said that before. Take time to learn about their personal goals, and that's getting to know them better in the workplace. Excuse me while I take a drink. This is strictly water, by the way. Provide rationale for the work you've asked them to do and the value it adds. So again, it gets back to explaining the reason why you're doing something and what the outcome is, what the value is on the outcome. So I have another story. It relates to primarily Gen Zs with a baby boomer employer, and this employer we are used quite a bit as a recruiting organization for this particular employer. It's a manufacturing situation, and this particular employer has dealt with a lot of what I would call low-end, younger millennials and older Gen Zs, and so they've hired people that were older, more mature, and then they've got this select group that are younger. And what they found is that the younger millennials and the older Gen Zs do not stay very long. In fact, they're either terminated or they leave on their own. And so this particular employer said, please don't refer any of those individuals to us at this particular point, unless they're exceptional. Please refer more mature, the 35 to 45-year-old individuals. See, Let me go back there. I think I missed one. See it as a sign of disrespect when asked to do things just because that's the way it's always done. And that would probably be the more likely the baby boomers who would kind of fall in line related to that. So they'll question if it doesn't make sense, why are we doing it? Provide some proof. Feedback and rewards. Like to be given feedback often, or they will ask for it. They want meaningful work, be clear about the goals and expectations, communicate frequently, provide supervision and structure, and they want recognition, some type of recognition for what they've done as well. I think from a human nature standpoint, we all want a lot of the things across the demographic, but there are some differences within each of those demographics because of the time they grew up in and because of the work situations, the employment situations, the career opportunities, those sometimes the educational situation for some of them. If you are out there and you're a baby boomer, you know that going into the workforce 40 years ago, you didn't require a university degree, and perhaps you didn't even require a college degree. You could have got in with like a grade 12 diploma, or less, depending on the type of work it was. The message that motivates, you will be working with other bright, creative people. They want to know that. That's hints to the work environment that they want to be involved in. It's more of an opportunity, a social thing as well, to work with people that are smart, creative, who have the same kind of sense that they do in regard to career development, perhaps, or skill development. Now, the last generation is the Gen Zs, or they're also called iGens. Now, there's a book on Amazon that I've ordered. I was kind of hoping that it would be here today, but it didn't show up in time, unfortunately. And it's if you go into Amazon and you key in iGen or iGens, there's a rather long title of which I can't remember now, but I'm hoping I get it the next week or so. And it might be a good book to take a look at if you're interested in working with the next largest demographic to enter the workforce. Some of them have already, but they're a generation that is just moving in now. The age, I think the oldest would probably be about 23 if we go back to the age frame of 1995 to 2010 to being Gen Zs. So some of them are in the workforce. Some of them you'll be working with as a youth, maybe through the YJC program or through the YJL program, or even through the employment services program that you have with your agency. So what about them? 77% of them believe they need to work harder compared to the past generations to have a satisfying and fulfilling professional life. And part of that, I think, has come about as a result of maybe what's considered to be a lack of opportunities. When the baby boomers were around, there was all kinds of opportunities, and there were still opportunities for Gen X, lesser for millennials. But this generation now has had to kind of claw their way, and a lot of them have taken jobs that were, menial, low-skill jobs to get into the workforce. Approximately 6.5 million in our population faced with a growing income gap and declining middle class. They're recognizing that going to work harder in order to earn more money is something that's going to be a practicality for them. And their attitudes are sometimes shaped by 9/11, which happened in 2001. What came out of that lasted for years, and the Great Recession of 2008, because in a lot of cases, their parents dealt with it. They lost money. They have a better understanding. There's some insecurity around that. They feel unsettled and insecure about their future to a certain extent. And 79% display symptoms of emotional distress when kept away from their electronic devices, which is not surprising if you're a millennial and or you are a Gen Z. You probably would agree with this. Again, my daughters are both iGens. And I see that in them. I don't know what they would do if they didn't have a cell phone in their hands, quite honestly. That doesn't make them bad people at all. It just is how they've grown up. Gen Z's ethics and core values, they're looking at independence. They want to be independent. In fact, a lot of them want to be entrepreneurs. They'll work at a job that allows them to develop skills that can turn into potential business somewhere down the road. Creativity, individuality,
Opportunities for growth. They want an organization where there's opportunities for growth. And I think I state somewhere in the next couple of slides that they look at medium to large companies, because typically smaller companies, there isn't that opportunity for growth in regard to moving up the ladder, so to speak. They're really interested in mentorship, and I'll talk a little bit about that. Technology, we already know what they're like in regard to technology. And as I said, entrepreneurial and social justice and equality. They are the generation with the most likely acceptance of any demographic out there, any race, any color, any creed, and more accepting than all the other generations, I believe. And then I state this in general. Workplace view of authority. They appear to respect and value authority in the workplace, but are used to being treated like little emperors, and as such want respect. So yeah, this sounds like a nasty thing, but it really isn't. It was, I think in some cases, it was how they were raised. They want those in authority to make them feel comfortable and set them up for success. And this gets back to the coaching and mentoring. They're very high on having support within the workplace. They want mentors and coaches, as I indicated, and view time at work. How they view time at work, they need flexibility. They're more likely to want flex hours to be able to do it when they want to do it, more time to do what they want, where they want to do it, as I said. Not accustomed to the traditional workplace. And this was what happens when you put a baby boomer or even a Gen X to work with a Gen Z, is that there is that conflict there between what a baby boomer sees, maybe as a business owner or employer, supervisor, manager as such, and a Gen Z. There is a difference in how they see the world, how they view the workplace. Skill development is very important. They want skills, want to build skills related to career focus. Again, that the bigger picture for them is important. They are more entrepreneurial. They have a long-term interest in being in business for themselves. And this is a concern, maybe a concern for employer, maybe not, in that that person may strike out on their own at some point because of their need to be in business. Work assets, their skills and insights can help employers become more innovative and agile in how they adopt, design, develop, and use Gen Zers. Don't have the same sense of entitlement as often associated with Gen Ys and the Millennials, because they know they'll have to work harder to succeed. Gen Zers value honesty with an employer and don't respond well to misrepresentation by an employer. Gen Zs are determined to earn success through hard work. And that's a pretty positive trait. They have an understanding of what they need to do to be successful. Work liabilities. A high percent feel that baby boomers will be difficult to work with. This could lead to misunderstandings in the workplace. And it definitely could in regard to that. And so that's a caution around maybe educating a baby boomer to how to work with a Gen Z or even a millennial for that matter. They require a lot of direction and supervision. I think it's because they want that. Again, it gets back to that mentoring and coaching situation. They need a constant reinforcement of their value. They want daily feedback on how they're doing, how successful they are. That feedback comes with a pat on the back, not in the sense of a literal pat on the back, but a feeling that this specifically they were successful at. Constructive feedback. They lack interpersonal skills due to technology-driven communication. And I think we all see that. I have my two daughters, as an example, have sat on opposite ends of the couch and not spoken to each other for 2 hours while they're on their iPhones talking to other friends, either texting or talking. So it's very interesting when you see them do that. Preferred work environment. Companies where opportunities exist for advancement. They definitely want that. Open communication between themselves and managers. Again, not to beat a dead horse, figuratively speaking here, but it gets back to that coaching and mentoring. They want that involvement by the managers. High use of technology. They are familiar with it, totally familiar with it. They are comfortable with it versus baby boomers who in some cases may not be as comfortable. Work flexibility. They want, if there's a need to work at home, if there's an opportunity to work at home, they will work at home. Mentorship coaching by other staff, mentioned that. Working for mid to large size corporations, organizations want to impact the world positively through their jobs. So they'll more likely go to a company that that has that opportunity to impact situations within the community or within a global situation. Looking for in a job, what they look for in a job, again, they want to make a valuable contribution in the workplace. They want to see that their work amounts to something. They want to be presented with clear pathways for career development. If you're working with a Gen Z, and you're trying to formulate where they could go from A to B to Z, perhaps draw that out for them as to what the opportunity is. And sometimes it may be hard to talk them into a situation, but if you can kind of show them where you could potentially go with this job, they're more likely to be accepting of it. They want to be provided with training and development opportunities. Again, that's high on their list. If you can provide within a workplace those opportunities on a regular basis, you're more apt to keep them. I think you're more apt to keep most people, but even more so with the Gen Zs. Want to work with employers who can prove that they make a valuable contribution, will take less money if the job is leading somewhere, but still want a generous pay. They're not as looking for as high a pay necessarily as the millennials, but they do want to be well paid for what they do. Communication. A large percentage prefer face-to-face communication, which is very, very interesting given the social media aspect or the use of iPhones and other phones or other modes of communication. Use of social media, email communication is second nature to them, so there's no problem in that area. They want to be mentored. I mentioned that. Employers must communicate a clear understanding of what is expected to them. Clear direction is asked for. Keys to working with Gen Zers: prefer working with strong mentors and teachers who will help them develop and grow in their position. Prefer a lot of direction and structure. Look to managers to provide clear guidance and ongoing feedback. Flexibility, again, some of these I've mentioned a couple of times. Flexibility in the workplace is important. Want to be able to use their technological expertise within the organization. If there's anybody that can drive technology within an organization, it's probably this generation. If there's any generation that will prompt the use of technology within the workplace to see its value, to see how it can create profit within an organization, to see how it can reduce time costs and increase productivity, it's probably this generation. Feedback and rewards. They're used to being praised and rewarded for every achievement. They do need that. They do need that type of support. They don't want to be left wondering whether their efforts are appreciated. So again, it gets back to that daily feedback, the discussion with what they've done and what they've succeeded at. To feel motivated and valued, it's important they receive the regular feedback, as I said. So I'm going to skip over that. And the rewards, time, money, other awards they like to receive. Message that motivates. What you're doing is making a better community or a better world, and you're making a difference. You're making a difference with this organization. The little photo at the side there, Gen Z is 54% more likely than Gen Y to say they want to make an impact on the world. So that is the four generations, and I have a real interest in kind of the social aspect of the generations in the workplace, and how they interact specifically, and how well they can work with each other. There are some obvious differences, and there are some obvious negative things that you see about it, both from a baby boomer standpoint, a Gen Z standpoint, and a millennial standpoint. There's sometimes a lack of understanding, and the more we as employment consultants or job developers can kind of smooth that over. We can provide information, knowledge in order to help our clients. Those are the folks we work with and try to find jobs for. Or we can help employers in better understanding. And my belief is that I had this conversation with a co-op teacher at some point, and he said Generation Z should be kicked in the bum, so to speak, to get them motivated. And I said, well, that really doesn't work. I said, my belief is that you can, not that I have all the answers or that I'm the brightest light bulb in the building, but my belief is that anybody can be motivated as long as you find out what the motivating factors are. And I think that's what we need to do in relation to supporting those individuals who are looking for work, in helping them see the direction that they can go, potentially, even if it does start small, and from employers in how we market our clients to them and say, I have an understanding of this particular client, and I know what will work with that particular client. And I think it's conditional on us to learn those things as such about each of the generations in order for us to be more successful and for our clients and employers to be more successful. And that's what we're about, right? Hopefully that's what we're about. So at this point, I think I have about 3 minutes left. So if you have any questions, I'll try to answer as much as I can. And if not, I will follow up with you if you provide an email address. And as I said, I'm assuming the camera's still on. I do have this. It's 11 pages. It provides a lot more information and about the workforce for 5 generations, or 4 generations. In fact, the Gen Zs are not on this, but also from the social aspect, not just work, but also from community and just living. So it's a great tool to have around. So anyways,